Capricorn Clark isn't just another witness. She was the architect behind much of Diddy's empire, his personal assistant, brand strategist, and eventually, a high-ranking executive inside Combs Enterprises. Her role placed her at the heart of his business and personal life. For years, she helped manage his image, his brand, and the narrative surrounding his public persona. But now, that narrative is crumbling, and she's the one holding the sledgehammer. On day 10 of Diddy's federal trial, Clark took the stand and delivered testimony that left the courtroom stunned. Her claims were graphic, disturbing, and deeply personal. She spoke of being kidnapped, locked in a room for 5 days, and threatened with being dumped in the East River if she failed a lie detector test. She described witnessing Diddy carry firearms, orchestrate violence, and engage in repeated acts of intimidation, not just toward her, but toward others in his inner circle, including Cassie Ventura and Kid Cudi. These weren't vague allegations. They were chillingly specific, detailed, and consistent with what other witnesses have shared. What makes her testimony so devastating isn't just the content, it's the credibility. Clark was no outsider. She lived in Diddy's orbit for nearly a decade. She managed his business affairs, booked his hotel stays, coordinated media appearances, and even arranged drug pickups under his instructions, according to her sworn statement. Her access was unrestricted, her trust earned, and now her words are pulling back the curtain on a lifestyle shielded by fame, money, and influence. Prosecutors are likely counting on Clark's story to establish a broader pattern, a pattern that supports potential RICO charges and strengthens the argument that Diddy wasn't just abusive, but systematically manipulative. If her testimony holds under cross-examination, it could shift the entire trajectory of the case. The allegations, including physical assaults, prescription fraud, surveillance, and control through fear, all point to a power structure built on secrecy and silence. This isn't just about one witness with a grudge, it's about a woman who was once trusted with the keys to an empire, stepping forward after years of silence to say, here's what really happened. And if even a fraction of her story is proven true, it won't just be a scandal, it'll be the collapse of one of the most powerful brands in entertainment history. Day 9 of Diddy's federal trial wasn't just another procedural session, it was a ticking time bomb. It began with jaw-dropping testimony from George Kaplan, a former assistant who had been granted immunity to speak freely. Kaplan detailed how he witnessed Diddy physically assault Cassie Ventura on a private jet, only to be told to retrieve creams to mask her facial bruises. He also claimed that Diddy once attacked his girlfriend Gina with green apples during a violent outburst. For Kaplan, the breaking point came when he realized he was complicit in covering up behavior he believed was morally and legally indefensible. Then came Kid Cudi's testimony, brief but explosive. He recounted receiving a distressed phone call from Cassie, panicked and terrified after Diddy allegedly discovered their relationship. Cudi said he rushed her to safety, only to later receive a chilling call from Capricorn Clark, warning that Diddy had broken into his home. According to Cudi, Diddy tore through his belongings, opened his Christmas gifts, and frightened his dog. The incident ended with a Molotov cocktail being thrown into Cudi's car, causing a violent explosion that seemed less like a coincidence and more like a message. The trial continued to build momentum with testimony from Mila Morales, Cassie's former makeup artist. Morales testified under oath that she saw visible bruises on Cassie's face, injuries she said were inflicted by Diddy himself. She went further, claiming she had personally witnessed one of the assaults. Although the defense tried to discredit her by pointing out that she had participated in paid interviews, Morales didn't back down. Her account added weight to the pattern prosecutors were starting to expose, a man whose private behavior starkly contrasted with his public image. Further adding to the bizarre nature of Diddy's alleged lifestyle, hotel manager Frederick Zamur took the stand. He testified about Diddy's strange and specific requests at luxury hotels. Rooms had to be kept at exactly 75 degrees. Hallways were misted with air freshener, an odd effort, Zamur suggested, to mask unexplainable odors. These requests weren't one-offs. They were routine, deliberate, and part of a carefully curated environment that hid what was happening behind closed doors. To close out the day, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, Agent Josh Croft testified about data extraction efforts involving Cassie's laptop. While his testimony was more technical, it added another layer of credibility to the prosecution's case. The evidence wasn't just coming from personal recollection. It was being backed up by digital records, timelines, and surveillance data. The defense seemed eager to wrap the day, but prosecutors had one more card to play. They ended with a cliffhanger. Capricorn Clark would be the next to take the stand. And unlike other witnesses, Clark wasn't describing Diddy from a distance. She had lived inside the machine. With the jury now familiar with a disturbing pattern of violence, control, and retaliation, all eyes turned toward the woman who once managed Diddy's empire from the inside. Day 9 had been explosive, but it was only the prelude to what was coming next. Capricorn Clark wasn't just another employee, she was a cornerstone of Diddy's empire. From 2004 to 2012, and again in 2016, Clark held key leadership roles at Combs Enterprises, including Vice President of Brand Strategy and Marketing, and later, Global Director for Sean John. She helped craft the brand's image, shaped its outreach, and played a critical role in elevating Diddy's empire into a cultural powerhouse. Her fingerprints were on everything from media campaigns to internal strategy. If there was anyone who knew how the machine worked, it was her. What made her so dangerous on the witness stand wasn't her job title, it was her access. Clark didn't operate on the sidelines. She lived in Diddy's world. She shadowed his movements, managed his calendar, booked his hotel stays, and even organized Cassie Ventura's entire public image. She wasn't just a professional. She was trusted with the secrets, the messes, and the damage control. And when silence needed to be bought, she was often in the room. Clark told the court that the trust she was given came with unthinkable consequences. In her words, the closer she got to Diddy, the more she became entangled in a world driven by fear, manipulation, and control. What she described wasn't just toxic, it was dangerous. She said she was forced to witness abuse, cover up illegal activity, and keep up appearances while the people around her were spiraling behind the scenes. Her testimony revealed that loyalty wasn't optional, it was enforced. From organizing media optics to hiding damaging details from the public, Clark painted a picture of an environment where fear ruled everything. She described how employees walked on eggshells, afraid to speak up, afraid to leave, afraid to make a single mistake. It wasn't just a job, it was survival. But Clark didn't stop there. She claimed that Diddy weaponized that environment, using his power not only to control those closest to him, but to destroy anyone who tried to walk away. According to her, this wasn't a chaotic workplace, it was a controlled system, one where silence was demanded and dissent was punished. And she wasn't speculating. She was reliving it in front of a courtroom packed with federal officials, legal teams, and a jury that hung on to every word. By the time she finished the first leg of her testimony, it was clear that Clark wasn't just telling her story. She was dismantling Diddy's entire narrative. For years, he'd presented himself as a mogul, a mentor, and a symbol of black excellence. But Clark's account exposed another side, a darker reality hiding behind the image. And in doing so, she positioned herself not just as a witness, but as the whistleblower who might finally bring the house down. Capricorn Clark's testimony about what happened in 2004 reads like a psychological thriller, but it wasn't fiction. According to Clark, shortly after being accused of stealing diamond jewelry loaned to Diddy by celebrity jeweler Jacob the Jeweler, she found herself in a nightmare. What began as an accusation spiraled into what she described as a full-blown kidnapping, complete with locked doors, threats of violence, and isolation. This wasn't a minor HR dispute. It was a calculated, prolonged ordeal that left her psychologically scarred. Clark testified that she was taken to a rundown building at 1710 Broadway, a location that was supposedly under construction. She was escorted there by Diddy's enforcer, Uncle Paulie, and taken to the 6th floor, where the doors were locked behind her. Inside, she found a folding table and a large, chain-smoking man she didn't recognize. That man told her she would be subjected to a lie detector test, and if she failed, she'd be thrown into the East River. She wasn't free to leave. There was no way out. According to Clark, the tests didn't happen just once. They were repeated over the course of 5 days. Polly would come and go, but no one ever explained what was happening or why she was being held. When asked why she didn't leave, she answered plainly, "I wasn't allowed to." The building became her prison. The people around her became her captors, and she knew better than to resist. Her survival, she said, depended on compliance. The psychological pressure was overwhelming. The man administering the test told her he couldn't get a good reading and would have to throw her in the East River. That phrase she repeated more than once on the stand. It wasn't a vague threat. It was direct, terrifying, and unforgettable. She described the man's tone as serious, not theatrical. There was no sense it was a joke, and the longer she stayed locked in that building, the more real the danger became. She was never physically restrained, but she said the mental control was absolute. The fear was so intense, she didn't even consider calling the police. She didn't notify her family. She didn't go to HR. At the time, she was new to the company and understood that Diddy held all the cards. Speaking out would cost her everything. Staying silent, however, meant keeping her life and her job. By the time the 5 days ended, Clark said she was simply told she could return to work. No debrief, no apology. Diddy never spoke to her about the incident. It was as if it never happened. And so, she went back to shadowing him full-time, booking meetings, managing branding efforts, and pretending nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Inside, she said, she knew she wasn't just an employee anymore. She was someone who could be erased at any moment. When asked why she continued working for him, her response was haunting. "Because if I left, they'd think I stole." The lie detector ordeal didn't clear her name. It made her more vulnerable. It tightened the leash. From that point on, Clark said she operated under the unspoken threat that anything she said or did could be turned against her. She lived with that fear for years. Her story wasn't just about being accused of theft. It was about being silenced through intimidation. It set the tone for everything that followed in her career with Combs Enterprises. The kidnapping, as she described it, wasn't an isolated event. It was a warning, a reminder that loyalty wasn't optional and disobedience came at a price. And that price wasn't just professional, it was personal, it was psychological, it was survival. Capricorn Clark's testimony didn't just scratch the surface. It peeled back the carefully constructed image of a music mogul to reveal something far darker. She painted a picture of Diddy living a double life, one that balanced billion-dollar branding deals on one side and a pattern of chaos, control, and secrecy on the other. And at the heart of that hidden world were three constants: drugs, guns, and hotel rooms. Clark wasn't speculating, she lived it, witnessed it, and under oath, laid it all bare. One of the most alarming revelations came when Clark testified about firearms. She claimed that on more than one occasion, she saw Diddy with a gun. In one instance, she described him entering her apartment while brandishing a firearm, furious and unhinged. He wasn't just threatening, he was unpredictable. The gun, she said, wasn't for show. It was real, it was visible, and it left her terrified. These weren't bodyguards protecting their boss. These were power plays used to control and intimidate. Then came the drugs. Clark told the courtroom that Diddy regularly used her to obtain ecstasy and other illicit substances. In some cases, she said she picked up drugs from female associates or through private security. In others, she was instructed to use her own name to fill prescriptions, medications that were later stashed in his toiletry bag. The implication was clear. If the drugs were ever traced, they'd lead back to her. She didn't have a choice. She did what she was told or risked losing everything, including her safety. Hotel stays were another chilling detail. Clark testified that Diddy had a habit of booking luxury hotel rooms under fake aliases like Frank Black, Frank White, and Jackie Starr. These weren't vacations or business trips. They were carefully orchestrated rendezvous. She said the bags he brought were always the same: small bottles of baby oil, cameras, lubricant. She was ordered to stay close by, watch television, order room service, and later clean up the scene. According to Clark, these hotel visits happened weekly and often involved Cassie Ventura. Clark's role wasn't limited to cleanup. She was also responsible for securing the rooms, protecting his privacy, and making sure nothing incriminating was left behind. She called it managing the optics, but behind that phrase was a much darker reality. If something went wrong, if a video leaked, if someone talked, she would be the first one blamed. She was the gatekeeper to a secret life, and that responsibility came with enormous risk. The financial side of Diddy's secret lifestyle was just as murky. Clark testified that she frequently handled large sums of bulk cash, sometimes as much as $100,000. The money, she said, came from club bookings during trips to Europe. Instead of depositing the funds, Diddy would hand it off to security, who would then transport it back to the States. Eventually, the money would end up in Diddy's personal safe at his residence. Clark wasn't just witnessing this, she was expected to facilitate it. When questioned in court about these routines, Clark didn't flinch. She spoke clearly, consistently, and without hesitation. These weren't one-off incidents or random choices. According to her, they were part of a well-oiled machine, a lifestyle that relied on silence, control, and calculated secrecy. One that blurred the lines between business and criminality, and dragged employees like her into the middle of it all. Clark's testimony dismantled the illusion of glitz and glamour. It exposed a world where loyalty was demanded, not earned, where luxury wasn't about opulence, but about shielding dangerous truths from public view. And most disturbingly, it confirmed what many insiders had long whispered about. Diddy's empire wasn't just built on success, it was protected by fear, silence, and a double life that few dared to challenge. Until now. Capricorn Clark's testimony shifted into harrowing territory as she described what she witnessed during Diddy's volatile relationship with Cassie Ventura. Her account painted a picture not just of emotional turmoil, but of complete domination. A man who viewed Cassie as a possession rather than a partner. Clark claimed Diddy's jealousy was all-consuming, particularly when Cassie began pulling away or asserting her independence. The more Cassie tried to create space, the tighter Diddy allegedly tried to grip her world. Clark revealed that the situation took a dark turn when Cassie started secretly seeing rapper Kid Cudi. According to Clark, Diddy was immediately suspicious and obsessive. He allegedly monitored Cassie's communications and was furious when he suspected something was happening behind his back. Clark said she was ordered to buy Cassie a burner phone, specifically because Diddy was tracking her official bad boy-issued devices. It wasn't just jealousy, it was surveillance. Things escalated in December 2011. Clark described a terrifying morning when Diddy showed up at her apartment, unannounced, holding a gun. Furious and erratic, he demanded to know who Scott was, a name Cassie had mentioned in a text. Despite Clark's denial, she said Diddy forced her into his black Escalade and drove toward the Hollywood Hills, allegedly heading straight to Kid Cudi's home. She described the drive as suffocating. Diddy held the gun on his lap the entire time. Once they arrived, Clark said Diddy and another associate stormed into Cudi's house. She couldn't hear everything inside, but she acted quickly, calling Cassie on the burner phone she had helped her buy. The fear in her voice was palpable as she told her, "Puff's at Cudi's house." In a desperate attempt to hide the call from Diddy, she changed Cassie's name in her phone to Stormy, a friend, hoping to cover her tracks if he checked. Clark's panic only intensified when Cudi's black Porsche pulled up to the house. She said Diddy's demeanor changed immediately. "There's that ninja right there," he allegedly said, pointing toward Cudi. The vehicle sped away before anything happened, but what followed was even more disturbing. Clark testified that after leaving the scene, Diddy forced her to call Cassie and tell her, "He has me and won't let me go." Cassie, she said, responded with chilling calm, "Okay, come and get me." What happened next was something Clark said she would never forget. When they returned to Diddy's home, she claimed he erupted in violence. According to her, he began kicking Cassie repeatedly while she lay curled in a fetal position on the ground. The kicks continued as she cried silently, eventually forcing her out into the street. "He kicked her all the way to the curb," Clark said, her voice cracking as she recalled the moment. "I was 5 feet away. Ruben was there too. He didn't do anything." Clark said she tried to intervene, but Diddy threatened her directly. "If you jump in, I'm going to FCA you up too," he allegedly warned. Powerless and terrified, she left the scene on foot. Once out of range, she called Cassie's mother, Regina Ventura, and pleaded with her to call the police. "He's kicking the shit out of your daughter," Clark told her. But Clark herself didn't call 911. When asked why, she responded bluntly. The mission of the day was to get Kid Cudi, no calling the police. She also claimed Diddy was obsessed with erasing the evidence. After the incident, she said she was instructed to help convince Cudi not to file a police report. She allegedly drove Cassie to Cudi's house, where they tried to do damage control. Clark said she confessed to Cudi that Diddy had shown up with a gun and told him, "If you tell on him, he'll hurt us all." According to her, Cudi was mind blown, shocked at the extent of what had just taken place. Later, Clark recounted an email she received from Cassie, warning that Diddy would release sex tapes of her and have someone hurt both her and Cudi. Clark said she didn't respond. She was mentally and emotionally done. When arson investigators later reached out to her, possibly about the Molotov cocktail thrown at Cudi's car, Clark said she hung up. She just wanted it to be over. But what she couldn't escape was the fact that the violence, threats, and surveillance had gone too far. There was no normal life to return to. Clark's testimony made one thing painfully clear. This wasn't just a toxic relationship between a powerful man and a young artist. It was a spiral of control and fear, one that extended beyond emotional abuse into violent outbursts and calculated threats. And if her account is believed by the jury, it shows a pattern of behavior that is not just disturbing, it's criminal. Cassie wasn't just Diddy's girlfriend. She was, according to Clark, another victim trapped in a system where escape came with consequences. Capricorn Clark's testimony revealed not just trauma, but the crushing cost of knowing too much. She told the court that Diddy threatened her life more than 50 times during her time with him. These weren't vague threats made in passing. According to Clark, they were pointed, calculated, and meant to break her spirit. He allegedly told her outright that he could end her life and make it look like an accident. In her words, he said, "I'd unalive myself, and no one would question it." Clark wasn't just afraid, she was cornered. She testified that after her fallout with Diddy, her entire professional world collapsed. Despite having held executive roles at one of the most powerful entertainment companies, she found herself unable to land interviews. Doors that were once wide open were suddenly sealed shut. Her name, she claimed, had been blacklisted across the industry. She didn't just lose a job, she lost her identity, her career, and any chance at rebuilding her life. Her financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Clark said she lost her home, her car, and eventually her health insurance. Everything she had worked for crumbled. She didn't just blame the industry's silence, she pointed directly at Diddy. According to her, he used his influence behind the scenes to ensure she'd never be hired again. The message was clear. If you speak out, you vanish. Not just from headlines, but from every opportunity. Though she reached a settlement with Diddy in 2012, Clark testified that the damage didn't stop there. She said the threats continued long after the ink dried. One quote stood out during her time on the stand. "It never really ended." The settlement might have ended a chapter on paper, but in reality, it became another form of control. She couldn't speak, she couldn't work, she couldn't move forward. She was legally silenced and emotionally trapped. Despite everything, Clark returned to work for Diddy in 2016. When asked why, her answer shocked the courtroom. "So people could see I wasn't disposable." She made it clear it wasn't about loyalty, it was about survival. Her reputation had been shattered. Her resume meant nothing in an industry where one man's influence stretched into every boardroom. Returning to Combs Enterprises, she said, was the only way to prove she still existed. That choice came with emotional baggage. Clark admitted she felt humiliated by the decision, but she was also desperate. Her son is autistic. She had no parents. Her financial and mental stability were hanging by a thread. In court, her voice cracked as she described those years, not with anger, but with pain. "I didn't want to go back," she said. "I had to." What followed was more of the same. Clark said Diddy continued to manipulate her even after her return. She testified that she wasn't treated as an executive, but more like a liability. A person who could still ruin everything if she ever truly broke her silence. She said she felt watched, controlled, and constantly reminded of her place. Every move was scrutinized. Every mistake was a weapon waiting to be used against her. The emotional toll, she testified, was severe. Clark said she developed stress-related medical issues. Sleep was rare. Fear was constant. Even after stepping away for good, she still questioned whether she'd ever feel safe again. "I lived with the feeling that I could be erased at any moment," she said. That paranoia wasn't just psychological. It was rooted in real events, real losses, and real threats. And yet, despite everything, Clark took the stand. She risked what little she had left to speak publicly and under oath, not to settle a score, but to reclaim her voice. Her story isn't just one of abuse and manipulation. It's one of silence forced through fear. For years, she says she was isolated, made invisible, and told she didn't matter. But her testimony sent a different message. "I'm still here, and I'm not disposable." Her words may end up doing what decades of silence could not, exposing a power structure built on intimidation, fear, and unchecked influence. And if the jury believes her, this case won't just be about Cassie or Kid Cudi or hotel rooms. It will be about how far someone will go to destroy the people who know the truth, and what happens when one of those people refuses to stay quiet any longer. As Capricorn Clark's testimony continued, the defense team made a strategic pivot. Rather than discrediting her with outright denial, they aimed to complicate the narrative. They presented personal emails and texts that showed Clark speaking fondly of Diddy. In one message, she confessed to having a crush on him. In another, she called him Chalk, a nickname short for chocolate. These weren't the words of someone describing a tormentor. They were, on the surface, affectionate, even sentimental. It was a calculated move by the defense to show the jury that this wasn't a clear-cut case of victim and abuser, but a tangled history between two people who once trusted, maybe even cared for each other. They emphasized the emotional layers of the relationship, hoping to raise doubts. If Clark could express admiration and flirtation, could her current testimony really be trusted? Could it be exaggerated? That was the subtle message the defense tried to plant in the jury's mind. But when the prosecution took the floor, they didn't back down from those complexities. Instead, they leaned into them. Trauma, they argued, doesn't always follow a neat script. Victims can have mixed emotions toward their abusers, especially when the abuse is psychological, prolonged, and wrapped in manipulation. The fact that Clark once cared for Diddy didn't negate her testimony. It made it more credible. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was finally telling the truth. Clark herself addressed the contradiction directly while on the stand. She broke down emotionally as she described her past. "I have no parents. My son is autistic," she said through tears. "My stakes were higher." Her voice shook as she admitted she once thought she could protect Diddy from himself, that she could help, that maybe if she worked hard enough she could shield others from what she had seen. It wasn't love. It was survival mixed with hope. That moment brought a wave of empathy through the courtroom. For the first time, the emotional cost of her silence came into focus. She hadn't just endured trauma. She had convinced herself that staying meant something, that loyalty could buy safety, that being close to the chaos might keep it from exploding. But as she admitted, none of that worked. "I thought I could help," she said, "but I couldn't." The defense pressed further, pointing to a string of emails sent long after she left the company. In one, she wrote to Diddy saying, "Your grace period to be mad at me has surpassed the agreed time. LOL." Another message read, "She was never my friend. She wanted me gone." These weren't the words of someone bitter. They were the words of someone trying to make peace. Someone trying to be accepted again. The defense tried to use them as proof that Clark had no real fear, just regret. But the prosecution was quick to reframe those messages as the writings of someone traumatized and professionally cornered. Clark wasn't sending those emails because she felt safe. She was sending them because she felt desperate, blacklisted, abandoned, isolated. "I wanted my life back," she testified. "My dreams, my competency. It was a plea, not a reconciliation. And the deeper context made that heartbreakingly clear. At one point, she admitted that she reached out to Diddy's legal team in 2023 after Cassie filed her civil complaint. The defense used this to imply she was still seeking favor, maybe even employment. But Clark explained that the complaint triggered memories she had buried. "I was traumatized," she said. "Her complaint didn't reference me, but it brought everything back. I reached out because I wanted closure. I wanted my voice heard." As the cross-examination wore on, the defense tried to twist her prior communication into weakness. But each time, Clark remained firm. She wasn't denying her past emotions. She wasn't pretending the story was black and white. She admitted she had moments of hope, of denial, of trying to forgive the man who had, in her words, destroyed her life. But none of that canceled the threats, the violence, or the systemic isolation she said she endured. In the final exchanges, Clark's raw vulnerability made the complexity of abuse crystal clear. Her testimony wasn't about vengeance. It was about breaking the silence that had trapped her for over a decade. "It's complicated," she admitted, "but the fear was always there. The threats were always real." Those words carried more weight than any email could contradict. By the end of her testimony, one thing stood out. Clark never tried to rewrite the past to make herself look perfect. She didn't pretend to be fearless. She showed the jury what long-term manipulation looks like, how someone can be loyal, terrified, hopeful, and traumatized, all at once. And in that honesty, she didn't weaken her story. She strengthened it. Because real survivors don't fit into tidy boxes, and real abuse rarely comes without emotional scars. Her testimony forced everyone watching to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the people closest to power are the most easily erased. And sometimes their silence isn't loyalty. It's a survival mechanism. One that, for Capricorn Clark, finally ran out of room. Capricorn Clark didn't just testify, she detonated a legal bomb in the middle of the courtroom. Her words echoed far beyond her own experience, connecting dots that, until now, seemed like separate incidents. Her account wasn't just emotional, it was strategic, detailed, and damning. In many ways, it has become the most critical moment of Diddy's federal trial so far. Prosecutors had been laying the groundwork, but Clark's testimony brought the structure into focus. Her insider role gave weight to what had previously been dismissed as gossip, speculation, or isolated wrongdoing. Clark wasn't a distant observer. She worked beside Diddy, managed his operations, booked his hotel rooms, and covered his tracks. Her testimony wasn't based on rumors, it came from years of proximity to power. She saw it, lived it, and survived it. And for the first time, she said it all out loud. The result has been a complete shift in the courtroom's energy. What once felt like a celebrity scandal is now starting to resemble something much bigger, a methodical, organized abuse of power. Clark's descriptions of surveillance, violence, hush tactics, and coerced loyalty suggest a system, not just individual acts. It's the kind of pattern that federal prosecutors look for when building a RICO case. And now, they may have the connective tissue they need. Other witnesses hinted at control and fear. Cassie's panic, Kid Cudi's account of being targeted, former assistants describing bizarre behavior. But Clark's testimony linked them all. She showed how these incidents weren't random outbursts. They were symptoms of a deeper structure. One where fear was a feature, not a flaw. One where silence was purchased, enforced, and weaponized against anyone who strayed. Her statements about blacklisting, threats, and psychological warfare spoke directly to the heart of the prosecution's likely strategy. It's not just about proving abuse. It's about proving that Diddy ran an enterprise that protected, enabled, and concealed that abuse. From NDAs to burner phones to coerced drug pickups and hotel rendezvous, Clark made it clear. There was a system, and it was intentional. If the jury believes her, the implications are enormous. This isn't just about what happened to Cassie Ventura. It's about a culture of fear that Clark says consumed every corner of Combs' enterprises. And if the prosecutors can back her story with documents, messages, or financial records, then the trial moves from scandal to criminal conspiracy. Even the defense seemed rattled. Their cross-examination strategy focused less on denying the events and more on reframing the relationship, trying to cast it as emotionally complicated rather than criminal. But as Clark stood firm, the courtroom witnessed something rare, a survivor not just telling her story, but refusing to let it be distorted. The emotional impact was just as powerful as the legal one. Jurors saw a woman who had everything to lose, choosing to speak anyway. Her vulnerability was real, but so was her resolve. She wasn't dramatizing, she was finally decompressing years of suppression. And in doing so, she made every previous testimony seem less like an outlier and more like evidence. It's no longer possible to see this case as just a celebrity on trial. The questions Clark's testimony raises are larger than that. How long can money shield someone from accountability? How many people had to stay silent before someone finally spoke up? And what does it say about the industry that enabled it all? For prosecutors, Clark's appearance may prove to be the turning point they needed. The moment when the public, the jury, and even the defense could no longer deny that something deeper was unfolding. It wasn't just a matter of what Diddy allegedly did. It was about what he built around himself to keep doing it. If justice hinges on patterns, then Clark may have delivered the blueprint. Her words didn't just recount pain, they mapped out the system that created it. And now that silence has been shattered, the only question left is whether the truth will be enough to bring it all down. Because after Clark's testimony, this isn't just a trial. It's a reckoning. And the consequences may reach far beyond one man in a courtroom. They may rewrite the rules of power, silence, and accountability in the music industry itself. Capricorn Clark didn't take the stand for drama or headlines. She came with receipts, scars, and a story that could reshape this entire trial. Her testimony wasn't just powerful, it was chilling. With every word, she peeled back the polished surface of Diddy's empire and revealed what she says has been hidden in plain sight for years. A system built not just on fame, but on fear, control, and silence. And now that silence has been broken, there's no going back. Her words went far beyond personal trauma. They hinted at a broader network of enablers, unspoken rules, and corporate complicity. For prosecutors, Clark might be the linchpin, a witness who didn't just experience abuse, but witnessed how it was protected, normalized, and sustained over time. If this truly becomes a RICO case, her testimony will likely be cited as the moment the prosecution's narrative solidified. That this wasn't just misconduct, it was systemic. For Diddy, the stakes have shifted. This trial is no longer just a reputational crisis, it's existential. Each new witness chips away at the image he's spent decades curating. And as more stories align with Clark's, the once unthinkable becomes possible. That the empire he built may not just fall, but implode from the inside out. Her words forced the world to ask, what happens when the gatekeepers start speaking? But here's where it gets even more complicated. Some fans are still defending him. Some former insiders have stayed silent. So we have to ask, how deep does this go? And who else knew? If you've been watching closely, it's no longer about whether something happened. It's about who helped keep it quiet. So what do you think? Was Clark brave for coming forward? Or is this just scratching the surface of something even darker? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this developing case. Hit the like button if you believe survivors deserve to be heard, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next explosive testimony. This story isn't over. It's only just begun.